Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of No Limits. My name is Scott Morgan. We're out the Motor City Madmouth, and we have a great show tonight. And I mean great. I mean Tony the Tiger great.
We haven't even done it yet. How do we know it's great?
Why? Because I have all the confidence in you, and hopefully you'll have as much in me. And my dealings with you have been nothing short of great. So, you know what? One thing in the coaching business, Coach Kevin Cooney, is you can never lack confidence if you hope to stick around, right?
No, you got to have that.
All right. Well, let me give everybody an overview of the broadcast. Speaking with former Florida Atlantic University coach Kevin Cooney, had a great 21-year career over at FAU, and I got to know him several years ago. And we're going to talk about Coach Kevin Cooney's story. So let's talk about your 21-year career at FAU. Tell me what it was like.
Well, it almost wasn't 21 years, but it worked out pretty well, Scott. I was blessed that they took a chance on me back in the fall of 1987. They had an opening because Steve Traylor, who started their program, was hired at Duke. And I applied for the Duke job, didn't get it. Steve actually got it, and I called to congratulate him because we had played each other that year. Montclair State, where I was coaching, was Division III. We came down and played FAU that particular spring. And so I said, is there anybody who's got an inside track to the job? He said, no, it's an open search. And he said, I like the way you handled your team and the way they presented themselves. I'm playing golf with the AD tomorrow. And he says, I'll put in a word for you. And so I got an interview, and I got hired. The athletic director that hired me always liked to say afterwards that they did a nationwide search. 6 people applied, 5 turned it down. So we hired Kevin.
That's funny.
I don't know if that's true, but he loved saying that. And there were some good people. Paul Maneri, who was at St. Thomas at the time, went to Notre Dame and then had great success at LSU and is now retired. He was a finalist. Mike Easom, who is retired at Indian River Community College and has the field named after him. George Pettick, who was at Cardinal Gibbons High School, had just won a state championship. And then there was another fellow, I've forgotten his name, Scott was his last name, was an assistant at Miami that year. Mm-hmm. And so somehow he chose a guy from New Jersey to come on down there. So I was fortunate.
Unbelievable. All right. I just want everybody to know that No Limits is being broadcast around the world. The audio version of No Limits can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcasts. Please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube, South Florida Tribune. We're striving for 1,000 subscribers. Please also comment, like, and share the broadcast. Want to be a good guest? One way to do it is appear in the chat room, or the other way is kindly send your topics to southfloridatribune@gmail.com. If you want to advertise cost efficiently, call me at 954-304-4941. We broadcast live on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Our website is www.southfloridatribune.com. My Twitter information is at Tribune South, and Candy Ebling is working behind the scenes, promoting the broadcast on the back end, more importantly, working on the website. So there you have it. That's our way to contact. We'll mention it later in the show in case you missed the first time. All right, so, Coach, one player that stands out is mickeystorey, who went to Deerfield Beach High School, who is the current manager of the Houston Astros AAA team, the Sugarlandspacecowboys. Talk about Kevin's story.
Well, Mickey, but
okay.
Yeah, it's a great story, to be honest. No pun intended.
Right.
Mickey's grandfather coached against me up in New Jersey. His name was Eddie Lyons. He's a very famous coach up in that area. He coached basketball and baseball at Uppsala College in East Orange, New Jersey. Anyhow, we were friends, even though we were rivals. And one day I'm in the dugout at FAU, and this was early because we were still in the third base dugout. So it had to be probably 90 or 91. And a guy opens the door and steps in. It's Eddie Lyons. And he goes, Kevin, I want you to meet somebody. And he's got this little kid with him. I don't know how old. And he goes, my grandson, mickeystorey. He's going to pitch for you someday. And I'm like, okay, Eddie, I'm in the middle of the game here. Can you go to concession stand, get a beer, and I'll talk to you later? And he goes, no, his mom and dad live down here, but he's going to play for you someday. I'm like, okay, great. So you fast forward to in the 2000s, I guess, 03 maybe. John McCormack, who's now the head coach, was recruiting coordinator, came in and he said, "Hey, you know that kid Story, Eddie Lyons, the grant?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "That kid's pretty good." And so we went down to see him at Deerfield Beach, and the game I saw him was state tournament game, and he gave up a leadoff triple in the last inning and struck out the side on 9 pitches after the double. Every pitch was a curveball. He had a great curveball.
Yeah.
So anyway, we were fortunate to get him, and the big reason we did get him was his grandfather.
Really?
He really, he was smaller in stature, so he really didn't have a lot of Division I offers. It was a decent student, so he could have gone just about anywhere. And I think that connection, and actually I kind of used it with him. I sat him down. I said, "You can go to junior college, and they're going to get you into pro baseball within a year, 2 years maximum." I said, "But if you come to us, I'm responsible for you because your grandfather and I go back a ways. I'm going to be, a grandfather surrogate to you. And I'm going to make sure that you get as close to graduating as you can before you leave here." So he came, and fortunate for us, he was freshman All-American that year. He was freshman pitcher of the year in the nation that season. He was unbelievable. Tremendous competitor, great curveball, really good fastball. So sophomore year, he gets banged around. I think the early success that a lot of freshmen get, oftentimes it struggles that second year, because you think you're invincible and you just try to overpower people. Now, that was a lot of what Mickey was trying to do. That was just overpower people instead of becoming a pitcher. And so he had a rough sophomore year. And then his junior year, he hurt his arm. And so he didn't pitch as much as he should have his junior year. And then his senior year, he got drafted anyway. I'm sorry. Minnesota drafted him. He chose not to sign. And he came back for his senior year. And in his senior year, he kind of struggled again because the arm wasn't 100% yet. Right. And I don't want to say I babied him, but there were a couple of times where I really wanted to use him in relief, and I didn't because I knew he didn't have enough rest, and I wasn't going to jeopardize the kid's arm. I made a promise to his grandfather. And so he wound up getting drafted by Houston and signed with them, either Houston or Toronto. I can't remember which one signed him first. I think maybe Toronto, but one of those. He wound up pitching for both in the big leagues. And he made it to the big leagues. I saw one game where he got hit in the head with a line drive. And it didn't faze him. He was a tough kid. He left the game, but, he came back strong. And then when he finished, he played, kicked around a while, AAA for a long time, went to independent baseball, had great career up at Somerset, which is now the AA team for the Yankees. Right. And I guess, he got to the point where he had to make a decision, and he called me. I remember I was at the church where I was working at the time, and I took his call, and he said, "Coach, I don't really know which direction to go." He goes, "I need to be in baseball. I don't really want to go back for another year if I'm just going to be an extra guy. I think I can still pitch, but maybe it's time for me to make a move." And I said, "What do you think you want to do?" And he goes, "Well, I'd like to be a pitching coach, but I'd also like to be a manager." He said, "I want to call all the shots." And Mickey really knew the game. When he played for us, he always had an opinion. He wasn't scared to voice his opinion. Right. He did it most of the time in the proper manner. And he would question, "Why did you do this? Why didn't you do that?" That sort of thing. That was kind of because he always had his idea of what he wanted to do. And he was a natural leader. Kids gravitated towards him. And so I think that's important. He has a really good personality. I think that's another important thing if you're going to be a good leader. And so people follow him, and he got a chance to go with Houston as a minor league, like they call it a quality control coach or something. It might be some on the field stuff, some off the field. So his first year he was in North Carolina doing that. They liked him. The following year they gave him a job in the Midwest League at Quad Cities. He won the league championship that year. They brought him back the next year. He won the league championship again. And he got promoted to AAA, right from, low A ball to AAA. It's really impressive. And he's been with them for 3 years now. They've won the league 1 year, and I think the overall championship another. And then last year they made the playoffs but didn't win. So he's had a lot of success. And a lot of those young players that you saw brought up by the Astros that were very successful in the playoffs last year, beating my team, the Yankees, he managed those guys. So he's got a bright future, really does.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. When I wrote a story about him for the Deerfield Beach Observer, I remember I was asking you players I should talk to, and you mentioned Mickey. And after my conversation with him, I was on the same page with you. Boy, we really got a good one here. And obviously, years later, he's made us look pretty smart.
And he's a great family man. They live in West Palm. He married a soccer player, Maureen, from FAU. They have two beautiful daughters. I think one is probably just turning 13, so he's going to have his hands full. And the middle one's probably 10 or 11, and he's got a son that's a great baseball player. He's on the field all summer with his dad, and then Mickey coaches him in the off season and travel ball. So it's a good family. It's nice to see. He had a rough family situation. They didn't have a lot, and to see what he gives back to his own children and to his wife is really, really heartwarming.
All right, let's go on to a lighter note here. This is one that we always talk about every time we talk a little bit. So we'll talk about a joking conversation we had when you mentioned that FAU was facing FAU, and you're asking me, this must be a tough day for me. And obviously, Tonyfossas was the Owls pitching coach. And what we mean by that is I'm a graduate of USF, but meanwhile, I'm writing about the Owls. I mean, that was pretty interesting how you came up to me. So what are you thinking? It's a tough day. And do you remember my answer?
I don't remember, no.
So you know what, Coach? I told you I can't lose either way.
Oh, that's right. You can't lose either way. Yeah, that's a great answer.
Well, I know. Hey, that's how I felt. I can't lose anyway.
Yeah, I kind of felt that way when Florida Atlantic's basketball team played Tennessee in a regional at Madison Square Garden. I mean, I really did want FAU to win, but part of me wins if Tennessee wins too, because I'm sleeping with a girl from Knoxville.
Yeah, right. I hear you. Yeah, you don't want to get her upset with you, but no, I remember. No. It was so fun. And I ended up doing a story on Tonyfossas later on down the line when he was with the Daytona Beach.
He's a character. Taught me a lot. Very interesting man. Tony was raised, his family came from Cuba after Castro. Well, Castro was still there, but somehow they got out, and he was up in Massachusetts. And he arrived at, I think he was maybe 7th grade or 8th grade, didn't speak a word of English, and was thrown into a Catholic school that he went to, and he went to the Catholic high school, and he was a Sephardic Jew. So he's, everybody thinks, well, you're Cuban, you must be Catholic. Well, no, there's the Sephardic tribe of Israel, was from Spain. So anyhow, he really knows both faiths very well. And we had he would room with me on the road. We'd have a lot of great discussions, and he really knew his pitching. He's a good guy.
I can only imagine. All right. So up to this point, FAU stadium situation has been awful. Nothing has been done. In 1990, you were telling me that FAU Stadium had never hosted a conference tournament. Thus, you always had to travel. What was that like?
Well, it was really frustrating and unfair to our players, in my opinion. We put a great product on the field, but we just didn't have the standard that was necessary to effectively host a conference tournament. The press box was and is kind of deplorable. It doesn't satisfy the needs of media. I mean, not in the 90s, it didn't. And certainly the needs have changed drastically since then. And the seating capacity was questionable, although, that you could bring in temporary bleachers. If you really want to do something, you could do something. The biggest hang up, I think, was logistically handling it, the lack of support staff at the university that A, was capable, or B, was willing to do the job as it should be done.
Right.
But it just, we had to schlep up to a beautiful new stadium up in DeLand as Stetson would host it. We had to schlep over to UCF to their new stadium as they
Right.
would host it. We'd have to go to Jacksonville. They hosted it. So, we were always on the road, and it's kind of nice to sleep in your own bed now and then. As a coach, it's good being on the road because I don't have to do any work. If we hosted it, it would have been physically a challenge for me because I would have been doing a lot of the grounds work and helping out and feeling all that extra pressure aside from the games. But for all those great athletes that we had, we were Division I from 95 on, I think, and 96 was the first year we were eligible for postseason play. When they brought us into the conference in Division I, it was called the Trans-America Athletic Conference in 95. They made baseball and women's basketball have a year of probation before they were eligible for postseason play.
Really?
The reason for that was our women's basketball team had just made the Final Four the year before in Division II, and they had Yolanda Griffith coming back, who was one of the greatest basketball players in college history. Our team had just lost in the regional championship game in Division II to Tampa, who was the eventual national champion. So I really think, well, why did you pick those two schools have a probationary year? So we were not allowed to play in postseason play, even though we had a really good record and beat a lot of Division I teams. So 96 on, we were eligible to host if we wanted to, and we were in the playoffs every year, never hosted. And so that's one of my big regrets. Not so much for me because, like I said, hosting is more challenging when you're the head coach. But for all those young men and for their families, always having to travel, it was wrong. It was just a wrong situation.
Okay. You mentioned me this week that the situation with FAU Stadium is about to change. So can you elaborate on that?
Well, I'm getting this from a news source that is, it's not some national news source. It hasn't been announced to my knowledge, by the administration. But there was an interview by alaccess.com, I believe is the name of it. And a fellow named aaronalbers, who I follow on Twitter, is a big FAU guy. He sent me the link to the story, and he writes about FAU now and then. And so there was an interview with the Al Access people with it's Brian White, correct? I don't know.
Right. Well, yeah. Brian White's a new athletic director.
He's the athletic director.
And you know what? I follow Aaron Albers. He's a good Facebook friend, and I support anything that they can go ahead and do. Okay. But yeah, no, he's always been an advocate for new stadium. Everybody's always he's been for years.
Anytime it's talked about, he always tags me on his Twitter. So anyway, supposedly there was this conversation, and Brian had indicated that there are plans. They've come into a fair amount of money because of the success of last year's basketball team.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why everybody invests all that money in basketball and football, because the return is so good, and that return gets spread throughout your athletic program. Okay. And so it's a matter of, if you're successful in those two sports, it can really trickle down to the other sports. So there are plans. They've got to take care of the basketball facility, which is atrocious. Right. And it's a miracle. It's a miracle what they were capable of doing. What Dusty did, he did things that we did. And I mentioned to you once before, and we'll talk about it later maybe. Hiding the gym from the kids. Don't show them everything. And you have to be careful and smart with your recruiting. So supposedly there is money allocated that's going to go toward baseball. Some of the things under discussion are a hitting and pitching center, possibly on the basketball courts that are adjacent or they're behind first base and right field. They run parallel to that. And the unused tennis courts, which are next to the bullpen. So there is really a good setup there. And they'd have to build something. And those cages, Scott, it's hard to imagine that in South Florida, the batting cages at FAU haven't been covered all these years. There's no roof on them. So if you're practicing in the fall, when you do all this training, it rains all the time in the fall. And then the sun comes out, but everything is wet and steamy. So it's really hard to really work effectively outdoors all the time. And it sounds, incongruent with being in South Florida, but we're the only school that I know of that doesn't have covered batting cages. And
Oh.
every high school I see in the state of Tennessee, beautiful cages,
Wow.
AstroTurf, great roofs. So that issue, I think, will be addressed based on this interview. The pitching, an indoor pitching facility, it sounds like that's part of the plan. Coach McCormack was responsible for obtaining $1 million gift a year ago. And I don't know how all that money is being allocated, but a lot of that money was used towards refurbishing the former football locker room that's in the Oxley Center.
Right.
So it was a very big space. And so they redid that whole thing. It's beautiful. They did it with a lot of FAU alumni help, both physically and financially.
Right.
So that's something that it's hard to get people to give money when you're not showing anything that their money's going to go to. Yeah,
Right.
there's a great need, but at some point, kids that are now men who have worked, and they have families, if they want to donate money, they want to know that the school is invested as well. And
Right.
if you've been around Florida Atlantic as long as I was, you look at it and say, well, where's the investment from the university in the baseball program? I mean, we had to fight tooth and nail just to get 11.7 scholarships. The coaches' salary, the stories I could tell you about how coaches were paid at Florida Atlantic when I was there. I didn't take a raise for years because anytime they were going to give me a raise, I said, give it to John McCormack instead. Because I wanted to hold on to him. He was very good at what he did. And people were talking to him, and the kid was making nothing. And I would get him different jobs on the campus. He had at one point 4 different jobs so that he could coach baseball. And I had to do all those things. I took camp money. I took at least $10,000 of money. It was my money to supplement my income, and gave it to our volunteer coach because he was a really good coach. I had no way to pay him. And so that came out of camp money. So that sacrifice had gone on for a long time. And, I think when you're asking people to give of themselves, they want to see, well, what are you doing? And they all know, that it's been a bare bones operational this year. So it's kind of hard to get those people to buy in. I think what's happened with basketball, Scott, it gives Florida Atlantic a great opportunity. But I do have a worry with that. The great opportunity is I went out to Houston and I never saw so many people with Florida Atlantic gear on. Right. People walking down the street, hey, look at you, hey, blah, blah, blah. It was unbelievable. And we had about 26 players out there, baseball players. You walked in at the NCAA store in this convention center, and there's all T-shirts from every school, T-shirts, hats, everything you can name. It's like one whole section is Florida Atlantic. The other section was whatever the other schools were. So I was telling a story to some guys looking at it, and I said, the first time I ever saw FAU T-shirts in a mall in Boca Raton, I walked into one of those stores, not Lids, but one of those, and there were 4 shelves. Miami was on top, all Miami shirts. Then it was Florida shirts, Florida State shirts on the bottom, FAU shirts. So my 2 boys were with me. I said, come on, we got to change these shirts around. So we took all the FAU shirts and put them on top of each shelf. So we buried all the other schools. And here we are, we went from that to now you're at the Final Four. So the opportunity is that everybody knows, everybody's got a chance to jump on something big, and they can see what's possible. The worry is that there's only so much to go around. Right. And, baseball has been, it was on the precipice of really taking a big step. And we didn't take the step at the time back in 2003 when Craig Angelis was hired. Right. And I had a conversation with him because we had won the regional, lost in the super regional. So we're almost in the College World Series. And it was the first time I met him. And I said, listen, we're at a certain place, but there are things that have to be done if we're going to go forward. And I said, we can't afford to go backward, and we can't do it on your watch. And unfortunately, we did. Nothing was done. The whole idea of football took hold like tentacles, just squeezing everybody over there. And the idea of a domed stadium was being floated, and guys are flying out all over the country looking at domed stadiums. It was a pipe dream to do that sort of thing. Wow. And so consequently, Monies were not allocated towards other sports. Towards female sports, yes, and that was because of the Title IX issue.
Right.
Of when you bring in football players, you have to increase what you're spending on the female side. So soccer, men's soccer suffered. Women's soccer got all full rides.
Okay.
So that was so we're at a point now where, okay, how are we going to do this? We're going to have X amount of money. You can only go so far, but there are certain things that need to be done over there. And that baseball facility, it's atrocious. It's pretty, don't get me wrong, but it's atrocious.
Well, I haven't been back there in years until they straightened.
I know you've been, your silent little boycott for years.
Well, I have. I'm not going to sit in a facility which is not worth my time. Let's go to the chat room really quickly. We'll go to the first one. As an FAU alum, Wayne Weinstein comments, I'd like to thank you for everything you did with Owls baseball. There you go. Another FAU guy that appreciates you. We'll continue on with Wayne. I know you had many players play in the majors, but who was the most complete player you had while there? Boy, I'll tell you, Wayne, you took my thunder, but go ahead, Coach, answer the question.
Well, the most complete player that made the big leagues, is that so? If we look at the question that way, I would say it was probably Jeff Fiorentino. Came out of Nova High School in Davie, and Jeff played 3 years for us and signed with Baltimore and got to the big leagues with them. He could run, he could throw, could hit, and he could hit for power. And heck, he caught for us. At one point, we had all our catchers were injured, and we put him in practice a few days, and he opened the season behind the plate. So probably Jeff, but we had some other great players that never made the big leagues that were complete baseball players. Gabe Samariba is a doctor now, and he was on the 02 team. He was a senior on that team. Just tremendous outfielder. He was about 5'8", 5'7". I think he still has the NCAA record for being hit by pitches. Right. He would stand so close to home plate, his toes were on the batter's box line, which is legal. So when you're standing with your arms, his arms were over the plate. And in the shower, he looked like a battered wife. He had been hit so often. He was all black and blue. So we had a lot of great players.
Well, all right, let's go back to Craig Angelos for a minute. So you're telling me with all your conversation with Angelos, none of this stuff came to fruition? Was it all talk or hearsay for the most part with what you ended up doing with Craig? Because obviously, there was opportunities, but apparently his priorities were in different places.
The priority was football. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Everything was geared towards football.
Okay.
And, that's fine. I understand that. You made a decision, but I think if you're going to make a decision like that, you sit down. If I was running things, I would sit everybody down and say, you know what? You're getting this, that, and that, and no more. Don't bother me. It's football. If you don't like it, go someplace else. But don't say, well, we want to be this, we want to be, and don't exude an expectation of success when you're not going to do anything to help. We had success despite our administrations. And I say that plural. We had very few athletic directors that did much to help baseball at Florida Atlantic. It was kind of like a circle of the wagons. It's us against them, and let's get it done. That was, and those players played for each other. They didn't play for Florida Atlantic. They played for each other. They loved each other.
Did you ever have any conversations with Howard Schnellenberger over any of this stuff? Because I know, obviously, he started the football program. We know he's a statue and all that. But let's face the reality. I think Howard Schnellenberger is probably the king of Florida Atlantic based on what he did to put the football team together.
Yeah. When they decided to go to start football, which I understand why, and I don't disagree with it, just like when Anthony Catney, as the president, decided to start Division I basketball. That's a good decision. Were we ready for it? No. But, that was the fault of the people he had in place running the operation. They just weren't up to it. So when they decided to go with football, the first year Howard came in and he was given everything that they could give him, his own secretary, his own office, separate from the athletic department. And everything was geared towards that. He had his own radio show, which when baseball rolled around, I was, I took over the show every Monday. I was the guy on his radio show. And then our success, that was 99. So that's a year before they started playing.
Right.
The 99 season was a year we won 34 straight games, tied the national record for consecutive wins. And so I was trotted out at a whole bunch of different things as, look at Florida Atlantic, look what they can do, and imagine when it's football. So, baseball had, we played a role in helping football get a foothold in the community, in their minds, that sort of thing. But, football people are a different breed. There's boom, that's it. There's no other world outside of there. And I'm glad that they have a football program. I think it's come at a very, very, very steep cost for some coaches and a lot of players at that university. But, that's where we are, and we have it, and we've gotten a lot of national publicity. So I'm great, and I'm happy, and I'd like to see them win.
All right, we'll go to Wayne Weinstein's comments again. It's football at all major universities because it brings in the money. As you stated, baseball has to share limited scholarships, like 11 or so. That's a very valid point. And, I graduated in 93, and baseball was the winningest sport on campus then. So there you go. This guy knows what he's talking about being an alum. So let's talk about FAU sports in general. Football, finally, money for the basketball program. Like you said, Dusty May did a miraculous job over there. And I got to tell you something, that when I was over at a Tomherman press conference for the spring game, I joked around, and I swear it was just a joke. And then they all knew it, that, Tom, isn't it amazing? He came here to a basketball school. He said, I didn't know about basketball. It was a basketball program. I mean, Tom Herman is one, and we kidded around about it. It was anything that Tom Herman, to me, of all the coaches I've dealt with through the years, is one of the best sense of humors I've ever seen.
That's good.
Yeah, he really does.
Yeah.
So, but he was a little caught off guard by my comment saying that FAU was a basketball school. But he knows full well when you're out there in the middle of a Final Four, the school obviously gets a lot of incredible attention on such a stage.
Scott, I know, unfortunately, the press finally latched onto the story, just prior to the Final Four or leading up to it, about what Dusty had to go through and what the basketball program had to go through. That gym is a glorified high school gym. You can dress it up, put lipstick on a pig if you want, but it's still a pig. And they're going to address that, and they understand that. The facilities it's incredible that he was able to do what he was able to do. And they were smart in the way they did it. They maximized the brotherhood, the attitude towards their kids, and the affection they're going to show kids, but it's tough love. Kids don't love you because you're soft on them. Kids have expectations. They want to be pushed. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be Bobby Knight and throw chairs at people and stuff like that. But, they want to be held accountable. My style of coaching was, I was a benevolent dictator. I was in charge. I had the final say, but you know what? You could talk to me. You could sit down on the bench and ask me how I'm doing, or how are my kids, or, what do I think, or what kind of music do you want to play?
Right.
So I think they found that, and they had to get the right kids. So they're recruiting. They got the kid that could fit into that system. And I think that's what's happened in baseball all these years, is that kids don't come to Florida Atlantic with stars in their eyes. I'll tell you a real quick recruiting story. Sure. Don't remember what year this was, but
that's okay.
We were looking for a junior college shortstop, and there was a kid out in San Jacinto Community College, right. Really good player. Came in for a visit. Now, unfortunately, came in for a visit in the fall. We had tropical storm warnings, so all the windscreen that we had to hide the back of our bleachers, because back then they didn't have fancy banners on it, was all blown and all over the place. It just was terrible. Wow. So he finishes his visit, and we're sitting down, getting ready. Let's fish or cut bait. And I go, well, what do you think? And he looks at me and he goes, Coach, don't take this the wrong way. He goes, but I thought you were serious about baseball here. Really? Now, we had just come off, so this is after 2002. So we'd just come off being close to the World Series. And so here's a national level kid that, is capable of helping us get to the World Series. And his answer was, I thought you were serious about baseball. I go, oh, we are. He goes, well, it sure doesn't look it. And all he talked about was, he goes, I'm not looking for bells and whistles, but it just doesn't look like what you're telling me is. And he signed with Baylor, who had just opened a $6 million stadium that year.
Right.
And Baylor went to the World Series that year with that kid playing shortstop. So, you have to find the right kid. We had kids that looked past that. We had one kid from Jacksonville. He saw the wind blowing out to right field. He's a left-handed power hitter. And he goes, does it always blow to right field like this? I go, yep. I go, you'll hit 15 home runs a year here. And he goes, where do I sign?
Wow, that's funny.
So the other things he was able to look past because, one of the main things that he thought could, make him more successful was there for him.
Okay. All right, let's talk about the parallels between baseball and basketball. I'll list them as they are, okay? And then we can nail them down one by one. Obviously, the one thing you were talking about with recruits is you had no locker room and you had the longest time with laundry baskets. You had to change into sweatpants. The kids had to change into sweatpants, and the recruit didn't want to witness that part of the day.
We didn't want the recruit to witness it. That was...
Yeah. I mean, that to me is unreal.
We would time things. It's kind of like with Dusty. Dusty signed a couple of kids, never even saw the gym.
Right.
Dusty signed his contract and hadn't seen the gym. If you read the stories about how it happened. So,
right.
We kind of had to finesse some things. Don't let them see, the game ended. We just won the game. Mac would take them. Let's go over here. We're going to head for a restaurant. So my goal was get him to Hooters as fast as I could after a game.
Oh, that's funny.
And get him out of the dugout.
It's a good choice. Well, you also told me that Dusty didn't see the gym and then he cried at the hotel wondering if he committed professional suicide. So
he was quoted I've read 2 different articles where he said that he had made a commitment based on, good friendship with Brian. They had worked together at another school. Right. And I think it was kind of like buyer's remorse. You walk over, you're like, oh my goodness. And he was quoted as saying, went back to his room and said to his wife, I think I committed professional suicide.
Yeah.
But he had given his word. If it wasn't Brian, he would have gone back to Gainesville and called him the next day and said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do this. But he had given him his word before he saw the gym. It's a good move by Brian. You got to say he's got the AD of the year.
Yeah, well, you know what? My dealings with Dusty May, there'll be a lot more of them next year as I'm busy running my operation and working on other projects. But what I got to know of Dusty's a really nice guy, and I'm looking forward to doing more with him and Brian White as time goes on. So we'll see what's what. So, all right, let's talk about the biggest feat, winning despite all of that. You talk about solid kids that, like you say, wanted to be there. Go ahead and elaborate on that, Kevin.
Well, the recruiting spiel that we used, especially early on, was, okay, I know you want to go to Miami. I know you want to go to Florida. You want to go to Florida State, or you want to go to Alabama, or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Are those guys on the phone with you tonight? Are those guys offering you the same money I'm offering you? Are they, and we're going to give you a chance to play all those people. We played everybody back then. I mean, it didn't matter. And we tried to play the best Division I schedule, non-conference schedule we could. We played Division I schools when we were Division II. Anybody that would play us, I would play them. And because I felt, 1, we got better. 2, it showed our kids, what they had to do to get better. And they wanted to beat those guys.
Right.
I had a player, and it was just kind of happening. This kid was at Montclair State for me.
Right.
My first year at Montclair State, we came down to Florida, and this kid, Danny Olson, he's a retired police officer now. Danny Olson was a great pitcher. He was a junior. So he shuts out Southern Illinois University. It was a Division I school. We're playing at Mark Light Stadium. So he shuts him out. I take him out after 8 innings. He's winning 5-0. And the trainer is icing his shoulder, and he's standing in the dugout, and he's pointing and cursing across the diamond at Southern Illinois. Where were you guys? Didn't you guys sign me? I just shoved it. It's like he was so angry. So it was that attitude. He had to go to a Division III school, pay his own way, and become a great pitcher and, sign a professional contract. Our kids kind of felt the same way. Those other schools didn't want them. Okay, I'll show you. Or they didn't want them badly enough, to give them a scholarship commensurate with their ability. And so it was kind of that always, hey, we'll show these guys attitude that we tried to instill in kids. And if that's your attitude, you're not looking for a whole lot of stuff. Changing in a parking lot's not the worst thing in the world. Changing in a dugout. I remember when we finally got a locker room. They in that little building next to the pool, they built it was built new in '98, I believe. And we got this little tiny locker room, but it was a locker room. And I told McCormick, I said, the thing I just want to hear after a big win, I want to hear those guys in the locker room, joking around, playing music, laughing. And I remember the first opening series that weekend, we won whatever. And we're in the coach's locker room. Mac opens the door, and all of a sudden you can hear all the noise, and the other goes, "Well, there's your sound, coach. There's your sound." And it was really, that builds camaraderie. Now it was cramped. It was cramped because it was pretty small. Right. We took, Scott, one year I took over the locker room that the general public was using to swim. The swimming facility is right there, right behind the ballpark. It's got these lockers in it. And so I took all those lockers, I painted them blue, and I left the little lockers in the back section. The general public could use them because all you need is for your swimsuit. Right. I painted all those lockers blue, put their number, and we would change. So we're getting changed for a game, and here comes people in to use the bathroom. It was ridiculous. We stayed there a year just to get the feel of a locker room, but wow, retrospect probably wasn't a good idea.
All right, let's go to the chat room a little bit. I'm going to go back to Wayne Weinstein. Wayne Weinstein said, I know back in '93, I had friends that lived in dorms, and they were small and dingy. All right, well, we've talked about an alumnus saying that. So George Eichhorn, actually, from Detroit, I've worked with him a long time, and I started with Ron Cameron, as you remember, and George and I have worked together for the better part of 43 years. Another thing we're going to put up there with George here is how competitive are the recruiting wars in college baseball, football, and basketball. We always hear about that in college baseball. I'm going to get to that, George, but Coach, keep that question in mind because we're definitely going to refer back to it. So thanks,
Wayne. Wayne, the dorms now are plush. You wouldn't recognize the place. If you have not been on campus, you need to come to campus. It's incredible the way those young people live now. That's the biggest change in college life nationwide. All the money, all the demographics dictated that you've got to make dorm life not the way it was in 1993.
There you go. All right, Wayne, there you go. So, all right, let's talk about the Stadium of the Palm Beaches. Okay. And this one here has always intrigued me a little bit because, I've often wondered, and I was able to, believe it or not, get on the media distribution list for the University of Florida when FAU held a game over in West Palm, gave my card, and now I'm on their mailing list. Probably one of the best things I ever did because we know the Gators, obviously a big, heavy-hitting institution. But I don't know if the Stadium of the Palm Beaches was there, but, if you're in that position now, in order to go ahead and offset the lack of a stadium like that, would you ever have considered to play multiple games at the Stadium of the Palm Beaches? Because that's a beautiful facility with the Nationals and the Houston Astros there.
Yes. Well, I'll take you back to before that facility. And when I was there, we had to go up to Jupiter and play a game there every now and then. And I didn't want any part of that because I felt every time we used that facility, which is beautiful, and you could make an argument it's a campus of FAU. I felt it detracted from our chances to get an on-campus facility. Now, I've talked to Coach McCormack this past spring, and I know that there are talks where they'd like to get a tournament held at the Palm Beaches, and I think that's a good idea. I would go for that. Play a tournament one weekend there, but I read an article a couple of days ago about TCU baseball, Texas Christian University. They just got eliminated by Florida yesterday from the College World Series. Back in 2000 and I can't remember which year, but early 2000s. They had a deplorable state, very similar situation. They were throwing all their money into football, and finally a guy stood up, one of their big money guys, and said, hey, if you want to win a national championship, you're not going to win it. Your chances of winning it in football is going to cost you a whole lot more money, and it's going to take a lot longer. We need to concentrate on baseball. And we need to, so what they did, and now they brought in a new athletic director. They built a $7 million stadium back in the early 2000s. Now we played there in 03 or 4, so may have been right around 2000. It was beautiful. It was 2 decks, and the upper deck hung over. There's like a facade that hung over. So they were like almost looking down at home plate. And it was very intimidating as an opponent because the fans were right on top of you. Anyhow, and then he hired a good coach and recruited well, and it makes it easier to recruit if you've got. But they were getting back to the point of playing off campus. They were offered an opportunity. There was a minor league team that was coming in, and they were building a stadium for them in Fort Worth. And so they said, well, you can just play in here. We'll sign an agreement. Well, the league that they were going to be in went belly up after 3 years. They refused. They said, no, we're going to do this on our own campus. Right. And that was, in retrospect, a great decision on their part. That's kind of the way I feel. I think you have to have your own place to build your own fan base. To do, a one-off and go up there and be capable of bringing in, 3 great schools from different parts of the country. That's a good thing. And we did that one year. The Marlins ran something when they first had their spring training up in Melbourne. And so it was, I can't remember who we had, Washington, Oregon State, and I forget who the other team was. But, from, northern schools or western schools, it was really good for us. But I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't make that a regular thing on my schedule. So I think you might see that happen coming up shortly.
Okay, I got a question about North Carolina, but Wayne Weinstein is a great question. How did you get North Carolina to come down and play that incredible 3-game series? I was there, covered all 3 games, and FAU Stadium was electric. It really, really was.
We gave them money.
Wow.
Well,
what was the payout that you guys gave?
We probably gave them $5,000 back then. That was about what we started putting down for guarantees. It got to the point where you used to be able to get a lot of great teams come down from the north and play their spring schedule in March. But then things changed in college baseball, and they went more to we want a 3-game series every weekend, and we're just going to travel on the weekends. And so a lot of schools stopped doing that, spring break trip. And now I know North Carolina is technically not the North, right? But so they were a school that I don't know how it happened, but we were able to get them. He's a former Division III coach, the guy that was there whose name is escaping me. But he was at North Carolina Wesleyan years ago.
Yeah, he got that job. Yeah, ironically, that series was elected. Now, unfortunately, the final game on that Sunday night, my grandmother Dorothy died at the age of 90. Oh. So I left the game and went over there. But that's
I should have gone with you because I think we lost late in the game.
Yeah, well, you could have gone with me. I could have used you then, but I was just sorry. Friends. No, not your fault. So, all right, now we have a few interesting questions in the chat room. Okay, and now we really need to address these. With NIL, do you feel it's affecting baseball greatly, or is it more focused towards football and basketball?
Oh, you have no idea. I mean, people, you have no idea. That's going to be the killer. It's going to separate the wheat from the chaff. You're not going to see schools like Florida Atlantic in baseball be the success that we want them to be unless they can get that kind of financial backing. And it's just not likely. The money that's being thrown around. I talked with Kevin O'Sullivan the other day, who's coaching Florida out at the World Series. We gave him his start at FAU, and he said, Coach, it's unbelievable. He goes, I'm on the phone today. I got 2 commitments, for the recruiting class, and I got 2 transfer portal guys. Mm-hmm. And, if there's transfer portal, there's NIL involved. Right. Because, as he said, there's one school in particular. We were talking about the participants. He goes, well, I'm not on that guy because he's buying every player he can buy. But if you're in the right school with the right kind of backers, and we know that that players have been bought since college football started, you know, back in the days of Newt Rockney and all that stuff. There were guys getting paid back then. It was all under the table. The $100 handshake, the job turning on the sprinklers at the stadium at night and getting paid $5,000. You know, that all went on. Well, now the cheating's up and above board. So, you know, you're at every player on Tennessee who just got eliminated from the World Series. Every player on their team that signs next year is guaranteed a 6-figure payment through the NIL if they will do something they have what they call collectives. So there's an NIL collective for baseball. They have some name for it. So if the kids autograph balls for them and they're given to the collective people and then they're selling them or whatever, they're guaranteed 6 figures just for being on a team. And, you know, so you can imagine what's going on in football and basketball with the money. But see, the opportunity for the baseball fan that has money is great because now they can be the big shot. You know, they can be in a nice stadium with, you know, luxury boxes and suites. And yeah, my collective paid for the starting rotation. You know, my collective paid for the entire bullpen. That's what we're facing. And where are you going to find that? And we're still in Porta-Johns at the stadium. Where are we going to get financial backing for baseball to that extent when there's so many other things that are needed as well? Basketball's a little different. You don't need as much. You get 2 great players in basketball, you could be really, really successful.
Right.
You know, baseball, you need 3, 4 great pitchers to be in the World Series.
Right.
It's not like it used to be. So that's the challenge. NIL, then the transfer portal goes right along with it. You didn't ask that, but I kind of segued into it. The transfer portal is terrible. It's one of those things where they threw the baby out with the bathwater. They wanted to do a good thing and give young men a chance to make a move. Well, okay. And they always said, well, coaches can leave and take another job for more money. But the player, if he wants to leave, has to sit out 1 year.
Yeah.
I agree that maybe that's not right. But the way it's done right now, where there's 475 baseball players in the transfer portal. So why are you coming to Florida Atlantic now? All right, if you buy into everything that I'm selling, and a big part of what I'm selling is you're playing for the guy next to you. And then when you grow up someday, maybe you're going to be a cop and you're going to take a bullet for the guy next to you. And you're going to learn that while you're playing with us. Or you might be a firefighter and you're going to go and, you know, put your life in jeopardy for your partner. You're going to be in the business world and you're going to have somebody's back and help support them through a difficult time. Where are you getting that now? And now it's like, oh, I'm not happy. I'm not playing. I'm going someplace else. Or somebody through a back door said, hey, I can get you $300,000 a year to play here. What are you getting where you're playing now? Nothing. Oh, okay. Transfer portal. Boom. Bye. It's a cesspool. It's an absolute cesspool. It's the worst thing that happened to college athletics. Baseball, basketball, football, doesn't matter. It was an idea that was completely well-intentioned, but they did it with absolutely no. They said, okay, you can all go. And now it's a monster, absolute monster. It's changed everybody's life. Those 2 things, NIL and transfer portal. I wouldn't coach today if you paid me $1 million.
Wow.
Because of that.
Yeah.
It's taken away everything that coaching is supposed to be.
Okay. Great question, Wayne. Appreciate it. All right. I want to go back to a question that George Eichhorn posed, Coach.
Yes.
He talks about how competitive are the recruiting wars in college baseball, football, and basketball. We always hear about how about college baseball. So, you know, there's something.
Oh, it's nightmarish. It's really a pain in the neck. You know, those guys are at the College World Series right now, and they can't enjoy themselves because they're still recruiting. They're trying to keep the kids they have who are thinking about going into the portal. They got to try to get back the guys that are in the portal from their school. They're trying to see who is the best fit for us that's available in the portal. And they still have their high school class and their junior college class. They've got guys that they've signed who are going to be 1st or 2nd round draft picks. Right. So you might not have them in by midsummer when the draft comes through, and now you've got to have Plan B ready. So
Right.
you're recruiting Plan A and Plan B and probably Plan C if you're, and it's gone crazy. It's all the way down. They finally changed the rule where you can't talk to a kid now until he's a junior. They never let you talk to kids at sophomore. The recruiting is nuts. No matter which sport, there's really, you live and die by it, and it's constant.
Okay, now George Eichhorn is another interesting question. I always wonder about this. He's on a roll, man. This guy, I've known him for a long time. He's seen a lot of games. Are the Big Ten teams at a disadvantage when they oftentimes open in Florida and they start in some chilly weather too?
Well, not to George, to be honest, not to the extent that it used to be. The Big Ten schools have facilities that are incredible. So, yeah, they're not outside in Boca Raton taking batting practice and playing an inter-squad game, but they're probably in a facility that simulates that really, really well. They also have field. I would venture to say that every Big Ten school is all field turf now. Tennessee is field turf. Now, Tennessee's supposedly in the South, but it's field turf, so you can play and you can practice. That's a big thing. When we used to recruit kids and from the North, and they said, well, why do you think Southern kids are better baseball players? I said, well, they're not necessarily better players. They're better right now because they're on a good field every day in high school. And all summer, you're only on a good field in the summer when you're playing up north, because when you're playing and practicing in March and April, one day it's 22 degrees and then it rains and then it freezes and then it thaws out a little bit and you can't get a true bounce. So that was the biggest disadvantage. But even the high schools in anything north of the Mason-Dixon line, you're seeing all field turf going down. So that aspect has gotten a little bit better. All these Big Ten schools will they'll play on the road. So yes, that's a disadvantage, but they'll start someplace. They might come down 3-game series, play Miami or play Florida. But they're also going to places that are not as challenging as Florida or Florida State or some of those. And so that gives them an opportunity. It's hard to play most of your schedule, the beginning of your schedule, on the road. I understand that. And I would never argue against that. But it's not as bad as it was.
Okay, well, let's go back to Wayne. All right. You shouldn't have done so well with O'Sullivan, LOL. He's laughing at this one. Okay. As I'm also a Canes fan, which brings me to the point of, what do you attribute Miami struggling to get out of a regional?
Well, things have changed. Miami's not the Miami that it was for a lot of reasons. And it started when they went in the ACC. When they were an independent, they could do whatever they wanted to do. The academic standard of the University of Miami, and I hate to, and I'm not trying to say this and say it's bad, but the academic standard as it applied to their baseball program before the ACC, right? Now all these conferences have acronyms. I can't get them all right. Has toughened. It's gotten much, much tougher. And, being able to sit at home and play at home all the time, which was the modus operandi of Ronfraser and then Jimmorris, that went away because now you're in a conference and you're traveling and you're playing in northern climates and, you're not in that cocoon. And, the University of Miami's home field, it's one of the biggest home field advantages that there ever was, especially in the old days. You'd have J. Rokeach out there firing up the crowd. You had Ronfraser and there were no Marlins back in the day. So that was baseball. And those people loved baseball. So, I think that's contributed to it. A lot of people say, well, it's the coaching. But if you look at Morris's teams, he had great success. And then once in the ACC, it wasn't quite as successful. And, there are a lot more challenges in a conference like that. So I would attribute it to that.
Okay, let's go back to
I'm sorry. Wait, one more thing. It's not just that. Everybody else is up their game. The Miami in the 80s and 90s compared to the rest of the country, it was night and day. there were only a few schools that were big time baseball. There's big time baseball everywhere now.
Right.
Wake Forest was horrible for generations, except for 1955, whenever they won the World Series. There's a ton of schools that today are really, really good baseball schools that were never any good. And so that's changed everything as well.
Well, you talk about Wake Forest now. A couple of years ago, I went up there for a sports broadcasters convention, and I had a chance to tour their baseball facility. Not only is it good, but they have some unbelievable science type of things that they're known for. They've
amazing. Changed it all. That's now the new standard, and that's what FAU's. The reference was a pitching lab is what they're going to build. That's in the talks anyway. Yeah, everything's that. It's got a pitching lab. We're all scientists. Put electrodes on a kid's body all over the place.
Yeah, that's what I saw.
Yeah, and the curious thing, Scott, is that everything we were teaching, they're now counter-teaching or contradicting. We were taught that you develop an arm swing, so your arm swings back in a natural way and comes up and around. And we would teach catchers, get your arm up here and throw it as fast as you can. Right. Now they're teaching pitchers, get your arm up to here and throw it from there. And that's where all those 100-mile-an-hour guys are coming from. Biotechnologically, you're stronger if your arm's like this than you are if your arm's like that, right? If you had to hold a book out. I used to make kids in history class, if they'd misbehave, stand against the wall and hold their books out like this. You can't do that anymore. But if you're holding a big history book like this for 5 minutes, but if you held it like this, you could hold it all day. So you are stronger by but we want it to be long and then get to here and then and they're saying no, it's better to get up faster and go. And it's hard to argue with science, and the proof's up there with the pitchers that are throwing so hard. And Wake Forest has been, they were the first. They got a big endowment. They put the money towards that. I don't know the exact deal, but there's some doctor that's dedicated to that.
The only thing I'll make a comparison, and we'll continue in the chat room because we got some good stuff going in here, is that what I'm seeing with these pitching labs reminds me of Rocky IV with Drago hitting that bag so hard that you could think the thing just go off. I mean, that was just unreal. All right, we'll go back to Wayne Weinstein, okay? And I'll mention some of these comments. I coach in high school in Broward, and you need at least 2 or 3 quality pitchers statewide. Very true. All right, we'll continue through, Coach. George Eichhorn makes another interesting point. I actually have to try to reach out to Chris. Made the jump from the University of Michigan, pitching coach to the MLB Detroit Tigers. Does this happen very often?
It's happened more recently than back in the day. Used to be that they thought if you were in college, you couldn't be in pro baseball. It's a big prejudice against it. Now, there are tons of college guys have gotten into pro baseball.
Really?
And actually, the reverse has happened. There have been young, I can't remember who, gosh. I can't remember who exactly, but one of the top coaches came from Major League Baseball. It may be just a pitching coach, but the pitching coaches are where the money is, and came to one of the major universities.
All right, good. Hello, Chad Tenma. He's one of our regulars, too. He's just saying hi to you, Coach.
Hi, Chad.
There we go. We got another one in there.
We taking up a collection here or what? Are we doing? Wayne's getting charged extra if he asks one more question.
Hey, listen, he's an alum. I'll tell you, if you're an alum, you really want to be on here.
Go all out.
All right, let's go back to George Eichhorn. He's anything but an alum, but he said, I felt so sad when the University of Detroit dropped baseball years ago. And I know it broke Coach Bob Miller, the Philly Whiz kid.
Yes, great guy.
Yeah. All right, let's continue on.
We played. Did you ever come see Detroit Mercy play us? They played us in at least 2 or 3 years in a row.
Oh, did they really?
Yeah.
I know
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead.
I had a tournament every year, and I'd bring in 3 northern schools.
Did you?
And can you see my messages when they come on my phone?
No, I don't.
Okay. Because some blonde just asked me for a date. I said, I'm busy. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm kidding. That's all right.
But Bob was coaching, and he'd come down and play. Good guy, gentleman, great guy.
Yeah. No, I mean, all right. So let me ask you: were you ever offered other jobs at FAU or afterwards?
No. Trying to remember. I applied for a few because early on I was very dissatisfied, and I really wasn't getting paid,
Right.
to be very frank. And I didn't see much of a future. But no, nobody wanted me. So I stayed there.
Well, I'll tell you what, you made a name for yourself there.
Well, that's fortunate.
In my opinion, you put baseball on the map there. All right, go back to Chad. I'm going to read what he has to say, and then you can respond. How important is leg strength as compared to arm strength when it comes to pitching?
It's a good question. I don't think you probably shouldn't separate the two. You have to, that whole body, especially the way today's pitching is, everything's connected, and now they know how it's connected. So, it's very different than it was in the old days where you think, well, you got to have big legs. Well, you don't have to have big legs. The prototype is more of a lanky kind of body, but they have to be strong legs. So, and definitely your arm's only going to hold out as long as your legs do from a stamina standpoint. Although that's changing in today's game. Pitchers, I would never want to pitch today. It's like, I hate to say that, but baseball's changed in a way that I think from the player standpoint isn't the greatest. I was a senior in college. I had 9 starts, 9 complete games, and 9 wins. That would never happen today. Now, it was a different generation. You didn't have the relief pitchers that you do, but that whole mentality that, guys go 5 innings, it's a quality start. 5 innings, I was just getting warmed up. I don't understand.
I don't either. Well, you know what? Here's the thing, Coach. Okay. I've always been a catcher myself, and that was the best position for me because I was no good at anything else. But I was mentally in the game at all times. I probably got hit with more catcher interference calls. I used to distract the ump, say, you're way off at that call. And then I'd get out of the way once in a while. If he didn't go along with me, I'd let him get hit by the ball back there. That's how ruthless I was.
You're one of those guys.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, we're not even done yet. That's not even the tip of it. Then I would make life tougher on the hitter. Then I'd go out there and talk to my pitcher. I did whatever you could do. So with that said, I'm really curious now that you brought that up. Why do you think catchers make good managers?
For the reason that you said, you're in that game thinking about the game constantly. The guy in right field is checking out the blonde down the line, or he's thinking about or you turn around and he's practicing he's taking his swings and then looks in at the last minute. Come on, it's a whole different game. Behind the plate, you're in charge of everything. You see everything, how it happens. So, your perspective is the perspective that a manager has. It's actually better because, you're right up on the field. So I think that's one reason. And they've got to handle, and every pitcher is different. A good catcher knows which pitcher he's got to kick in the butt when he goes out to the mound, what pitcher he's got to put his arm around him and hey, come on, bud, you're okay. Which pitcher he has to give an intelligent answer to, which pitcher he needs to distract and make a joke. So I think that. And you use that as a manager or as a coach all the time.
Well, amazingly enough, between innings, as if that wasn't done, I was so hyper. I would warm up the pitchers in the bullpen between innings. I couldn't sit still. I was like a jumping jack back there.
You were ADD before they knew about it.
Well, I hear you. That's the truth. And I'll never be afraid to admit I was hyper. But here's the thing. The reason why I became a catcher is our 2 starting catchers didn't show up that day. My dad was actually managing the team, and he wanted to know who wanted to catch. When my arm was raised so high and I was loud, and I mean really loud, he put me in there, and those guys never saw behind the plate again.
That's great.
One of them quit. I won the job, and I stayed that way. And here's an amazing thing. I tried to catch a foul ball one time. I did with my mask on and caught it. Then when I had to take it off, then I didn't catch anymore because I had my eye on the ball at all times. Where when I lost a tenth of a second, then at that particular point, but it doesn't matter. And I won't tell you how many. My dad owned a sporting goods store, so I won't tell you how many cups I used behind the plate because I got hammered, but I loved every bit of the beating there.
Yeah.
I want to bring that up to you. All right, let's go back to Chad. All right, Chad. Here we go. Go for Kevin. Coach Keven, do you think the pitch is good for the game?
What pitch?
What pitch are you referring to? All right, I'm sure he'll respond back when he does. I'll put that one up.
Maybe maybe you mean the change in pitching the way it is now. No, I don't. Chad, I think that it's really hurt Major League Baseball more than anything. Who wants to watch people strike out all the time? And basically, the ball's not in play. It's a whole focus of all these rule changes that they made is to try to get more action. Baseball's a great game when the ball gets hit, and because you get to see great athleticism that you don't see anywhere else.
So apparently, he's referring to the pitch clock now.
Okay. So the pitch clock.
Right.
I like the idea of the pitch clock. I had a pitcher he goes, Coach, I work fast. I want to get out of there before they know I'm horseshit. And there's a lot to working fast. I worked fast as a pitcher. I knew what I wanted to do. I threw strikes and I wanted my infielders to be ready. So boom, boom. I didn't want to fool around out there. We really slowed that game down. The hitters, maybe more than the pitchers.
Okay.
So you should maybe call it a hit clock, because Derek Jeter, I love Derek Jeter, but how many times you have to step out, take the deep breath, do your batting gloves, take your 2 practice swings, get back in. Every at bat, in between every pitch. That's nonsense. So that's been eliminated. It's not that I want to get the game over faster. The game's beautiful. I want to see the game played. I don't want to watch you preening and doing your breathing exercises that some yoga guy taught you. It's all crap. Just get in there.
They're trying to eliminate the extracurricular activities. Let's go back to Joyce Drycourt for a moment. He says, I may have missed this, Coach, but do you prefer players who are drafted by MLB teams to a guy go directly in MLB or to stay in college for more development? I guess he's referring to the high school player versus a college player.
George, I think it depends on a number of things. What's your family situation? And knowing what that is, you can make a decision. Okay, now financially, when they're talking to me, my family is well off. So the money isn't the driving force for me. Now, if it's life-changing money, I think that's, the way you got to look at it. Somebody gives you $2 million and you're 18 years old, you can have that $2 million invested and it can really change your life. I think now, of course, the money's crazy now compared to even when I coached, but I would always counsel guys, you have to understand that if you sign out of high school, you are working for a living. You're not playing baseball. You're working for a living. You're going to go someplace you've never been before. You're going to be surrounded by a bunch of people that might not even speak English. Not that that's a bad thing, but unless you speak their language, you're not going to form, these friendships as easily. You're going to get paid extremely poorly. You will live in bad conditions, and you will travel poorly. That's minor league baseball. And when you do get close to some guys, you walk in one night and the guy's locker is empty because he got released. I've had that happen to me when I was in the minor leagues. So the dynamic of a team feeling will not be there for you. Then you're going to have to come home in the off season, and they're going to tell you, well, you can go to school. Yeah, well, you'll probably get home too late to register for classes. And they want you to train. So you're going to be training. You can't be doing your schoolwork. And then you got to go to spring training. So they make it sound easy. I think it really comes down to, what do you value in life? And if I just want to get in and play minor league baseball because I want to be in the big leagues in 2 years, you're better off from a big league standpoint, the way it's structured right now, to sign out of high school, because then you get to the big leagues at a younger age, theoretically, as opposed to somebody and that helps you in terms of arbitration eligibility and free agency, where you're going to make the big money. Like Aaron Judge, because he went to college, played 3 years of college, he's on a different clock than guys that signed out of high school. And so they were eligible for arbitration and free agency sooner than he was. So he got paid peanuts for 6 years by the Yankees. It was ridiculous.
Right.
And so that's the negative to it. The system's kind of messed up, but it's their system. They want you to go into pro baseball.
All right, we'll go back to Wayne again, your favorite guy here. Let's let Wayne roll. I think when a pitcher is throwing strikes, he wants to get on the mound, keep throwing as quickly as he can. I guess it's pretty. You agree with that, don't you?
I agree, but some guys have been taught to be very methodical, to repeat, do everything the same way. You know, throw your pitch, get it back, turn around, rub the ball up, get back on, take a deep breath. Now looking for the sign. You know, now shake off. You know, 10 minutes have gone by. So I agree with you, but I also think it's like, well, my style is a little faster than, say, your style. We still maybe not dilly-dallying, but one guy's slower than the other.
Okay, back to Chad. I love the new shift rules and larger bases.
Oh, yes.
What are your feelings?
I love them. It disappointed me when I started to watch the regionals in the World Series because I'd forgotten that the shift is not, shift is still there in college baseball. In pro baseball, they have so much information. And so they every at-bat you've ever taken, or even the at-bats you've dreamt about, they probably saw where you hit the ball, and they can feed that into their computers, and boom. Hey, man, how many times you want to see a guy hit a one-hopper to a second baseman that's playing 40 feet into right field? That's not the way the game was designed. Now, that being said, back in about 95, 96, I started really using it. We started shifting, not to the extreme that they did, but I would put my shortstop on the other side. If we had a guy, lefty, you're looking at his spray chart, all his ground balls are to the right side. His fly balls are scattered. So, it was kind of scary sometimes the first few times I did it, because I know with my luck, I'll move him over and he'll dribble one the other way. It's a good idea, but again, it got beat to death.
All right. Well, again, Wayne's got another good one, so I'm just going to keep riding the chat, Coach. That's because there are so many players with superstitions in baseball who had the weirdest, craziest superstitions that you coached.
Wow, that's a good one.
Yeah, he's on a roll, this guy.
I'll give you my weirdest superstition. It happened one year. In 99, we had a great year. I mean, it was phenomenal. We didn't even know we had this winning streak going until somebody pointed. A guy from the Boca News showed up at practice. I'm like, "What are you doing here? Nobody covers us." And he goes, "Well, you're going up, and if you win these 3 games, you tie the state record for consecutive wins." And that was the first our kids even knew about it. So anyway, but I knew I knew we were winning, and I went to this sandwich shop in Boca, and I had this, I had a turkey with lettuce, tomato, and mayonnaise, and I had that for lunch. And then, we were winning. I go, I'll go there again. And I stopped drinking. I used to have 2 beers with dinner every night, but I was working out a lot in the weight room, and I was taking protein shakes. And so when I got home, I'd worked out, I had a protein shake. The last thing I wanted was a bottle of beer. So I did. Yeah. And then I realized, well, wait a minute, I can't have a beer because we're winning. So I had that same sandwich all the time, and I came close to drinking. We were on a road, we got rained out, and the 4 coaches went to the hotel bar, and come on, let's have a drink. And I go, what do you want? I'll have a Heineken. I go, no, I can't have anything. So, but other players, they're okay. I remembered it. Who asked this? Wayne?
Yep.
Okay, Wayne, crazy superstition. Now, this is not FAU, Montclair State. Montclair State, 1987, we're in the Division III World Series. Had a kid named Pepe Herrero, big, strong Cuban kid. His mother had all these saint cards, like Catholic saints, and they had their prayer cards, and she gave them to him to keep in his pocket when he played in the game. So every game he played, he had, I don't know what saints they were even. He had like 4 saint cards in there. So I took him out for a pinch runner in this one extra inning game. Right. He got the 3rd. We had 1 out. I figured, you know what? We need an extra run. If we get a pop-up or a pass ball, he's never going to score. Right. So I took him out. It was the 8th inning. And I took him out, and I come in the dugout from coaching third base, and he's ready to kill me. And he goes, "You don't ever do that. You don't take me out." He goes, "Here, you take these." And he's handing me these cards. I'm like, "What the heck are these, Peppy?" He goes, "Gee, my mother gave me these. You got to take them now." And the scary thing about that was that Pepe was the first baseman. We had a huge right fielder who was a natural first baseman, but I had to move him in, take Pepe's place for the 9th inning or 10th, whatever inning it was. And the backup outfielder was just a short kid. He's like 5'7". And the last out of the game was a ball hit the right field, and it looked like he was going to have to jump at the fence to catch it. And Pepe standing next to me goes, "He better go catch that ball. He better catch it." I can't say what he really said, but he was. And then he just turned and he looked at me and he took the cards back after the last out. He goes, "Don't ever take me out again."
That's funny. All right. Well, you know what? We're going to the crew, and I still have more for you, but I'm rolling with these guys. What's your favorite baseball movie or documentary, or realistic to the game, by Chad?
That's a good one.
That's why we're putting them up.
Yeah. Well, the easy answer is Field of Dreams, especially if you're a father or if you ever had a father. That's a good movie. The realism in it was not very realistic. There's some bad baseball players in that movie.
Right. I was actually at the Field of Dreams site in Dyersville, Iowa.
Oh, really?
Pretty cool place, though.
I recreated it 2 years ago in our garden, and I had a picture of me in my FAU uniform coming through with a bat through the corn.
Did you?
Yeah, my players loved it when I posted it. I really liked The Natural. The Natural, again, not great realism. Roy Hobbs was not really the best pitcher that you ever saw, but I thought that was a great movie. And the music, of course, the music was phenomenal. It's hard not to like that movie. And Bingo Long's Traveling All-Star. That was a movie with Richard Pryor and Billy D. Williams. Find that somewhere. Bingo Long's Traveling All-Star. Something like that.
All right. Well, Chad, you know what? There's no way that we cannot even mention Mark the Bird Fidrich. I mean, God almighty.
The Bird.
That'd be fun to watch, or what?
He was amazing. That year, it was him and the documentary on him, I think, was one of the best. If you want to see a documentary that kind of tugs your heartstrings because of, it just kind of, his arm got ruined, and but he's just a down to earth guy. I think he's passed away now.
Yeah, because of an unfortunate trailer. All right, We'll go back to Wayne. I have a few other questions I'm going to get to you sooner or later, but that's okay. I love it when we have guys like this, and now we have one of our young guys you're going to get to meet pretty soon too. So back to Wayne. How many games do you feel were won due to teams not adjusting to the heat? I've always wondered about that.
I don't know. I don't know how you'd put a number on that. That was a difficult thing. You playing in South Florida on Sunday mornings, and that heat could get to you. And then depending on your dugout, we'd go up to Mercer, and their dugouts were just concrete. Ours were concrete, but they had no ventilation. There was no open block. At least we had like an open area there. And it baked you if you were in that dugout. And it was small, so everybody's cramped in there. And we had one kid, Alex Fonseca, had severe cramping issues, hydration issues. But a lot of that is kids don't take care of themselves. You have to monitor what they're drinking, making sure that they're drinking.
Okay. All right. Now, any contact with FAU to the Final Four? Because I know they played Tennessee in Madison Square Garden, the Final Four, and then you mentioned that you had a little bit of interaction with Tom Herman, the football coach. Is that correct?
No, you did.
Well, I did. Okay.
Yeah. No, I had interaction. Well, I wasn't going to go. I wanted to go. My son wanted me to come up and see them play Tennessee at the Garden. My wife wanted me to go because my one son lives in New Jersey. And I just didn't want to do it. My wife is a caretaker for her ailing dad, and there's a lot of responsibility here on our farm, and I just didn't want to do it. Then when they won, we're driving to Mass that Sunday morning, and as I'm pulling in the parking lot, my wife goes, "Okay," and she's on her phone the whole time we're driving. She goes, "Okay, you're all set." And I'm like, "What do you mean I'm all set?" She goes, I got this flight to go to Houston. You want me to book it?" I'm like, no, you're rushing. I can't do that. Anyhow, long story. My other son out in New Jersey, in Missouri, who pitched for me at FAU, he's on the phone. "Pops, you got to come out here."
Right.
So anyway, the whole thing got together. My one son flew in from New Jersey. I drove to Springfield, Missouri. Then my grandson and my son Jim, we drove to Houston to see the game. And then after the game, we turned around and drove to Arkansas because his son had a tournament game at 8:00 in the morning. It was tremendous. It was just a tremendous event. I got to see alums from my first team. I sat next to Brian Keven. He's a captain airline pilot for American Airlines.
Right.
Saw Pat Murray, who's a fire chief, I think, in Boca. I saw Dave Edinger. His dad is a retired fire chief at Boca. Some old fans that had been there forever. And everybody's saying hello to me and shaking hands with me. I was trying to go up to get a beer at halftime. And this pretty good looking woman is in the row behind these people I'm talking to. And she's like, "Are you a legend?" She goes like that to me. And I'm like, "Well, if you want me to be, honey, I'm a legend." And so she gave me a hug and she said, "Thanks for everything you did." She knew who I was, but it was great. It was really nice. And just the pride, and it was just like getting stabbed in the heart when the buzzer went off and that ball went through. It was tremendous. It's just, I was so proud. You don't understand when it's your school and you're working there and it's got all its warts and bad sides, but it's your school
Right.
and you're that close. I talked to a lot of former men's basketball players on that walk, and they were so happy to see what had happened. And I wrote something on Twitter and on Facebook or somewhere that, gosh, it got like 800, 900 some likes and shares and stuff.
Wow.
And people just, all of a sudden, people from other teams at FAU. I ran cross country. I played tennis. I know what you're talking about, because I wrote about, you don't know what it's like to change, have no locker room, change in a dugout, this, that, and the other things that we all went through. The vans we had to drive in, 15-hour bus rides. And so all these other, and they said, don't forget our soccer players. Don't forget, I played this. It was really touching. The people that reached out to me after that, the interweb, you never know who's out there.
All right, now here's a good question from Chase Blake, and you're going to meet him on 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. This kid's one of the brightest young kids I've ever seen, and I like to develop talent here as well, and he's definitely one of them. So he says, does FAU's basketball success help FAU's recruiting for baseball?
Oh, sure. Definitely, you don't have to explain who you are, where you're located. You right away, you have a talking point. Because, the Final Four is entertainment. Everybody is aware of the Final Four. You don't have to be a basketball fan. So, definitely should help it.
George Eichhorn, do you prefer the aluminum or wood bats for hitters in college? Before you answer that, though, Chad, I'm glad you're loving this show. What a great guest. You know what? We appreciate you coming on here, asking great questions. And I work as hard as I can, especially with the one-on-one interviews, to get to know people a lot more, particularly the ones that I have relationships with. But Chad, you know what? We appreciate the kind words. Thank you so much. And thanks for being a very loyal participant. I tell you, guys like you are a classic. Thanks, Chad, very much. Now back to George Eichhorn. Do you prefer the aluminum or wood bats for hitters in college? And does it make it a tougher transition when they finally go to the wood bat when they play professional baseball?
Yes. There's no question, but they do get a lot of playing time with wooden bats. Most collegiate summer leagues are wood bat leagues now.
Okay.
So, you'll play not as many games with a wooden bat. And a lot of guys that are going to be prospects, they'll practice with a wood bat. I like the sound of it. There's no question. But, the hang up on aluminum versus John McCormick used to say this all the time. He goes, everybody said, "Oh, it's an aluminum bat hit." You'd hear that all the time when the guy would fist one. Well, it's the only bat anybody's used since 1976. Think about that. So since 1970, that's a lot of years ago, isn't it? I can't do that math in my head. Nobody's known anything but an aluminum bat. All the little leagues, all the colleges, all the high schools. So let's get over it. That's the bat we have. And although some people have tampered with them, there was a school in Florida was accused of rolling their bats. It does something molecularly to them, put them in some kind of roller, and their home run production was greater before they got called out on it than after.
Okay. All right, so now let's talk about FAU baseball under John McCormack. You've worked with him for a lot of years anyhow. So when I talk about FAU baseball, what areas did both of you recruit? Locally, nationally, sprinkled outside? You told me that John Mack used to like to recruit in Florida, Palm Beach, Broward, and in-state kids. So let's put the two together and give me your observations about where the state of the program is with Coach Mack. Obviously, and he inherited it from you. You made sure there was enough money for him to hang around until he got the job, and then we'll take it to the recruiting side.
Yeah, he's done a great job. Everybody that knows the situation at Florida Atlantic and the restraints under which you operate has nothing but high praise for the coaches that have gone through there, and John certainly is worthy of that. He's won several conference championships. They've been in a number of regionals. And they've been successful. He has one, I can't pronounce this kid's name. It's Schauunel. But he's a finalist for the Golden Spikes Award, one of the best college baseball players in the nation this year. Right. So, he's done very well. His recruiting when he came to us was to change our focus from out of state. I didn't think that we had anything really good to offer an in-state kid compared to the in-state colleges. My focus was, if we can get a kid from Iowa or New Jersey or Pennsylvania, all you got to do is show him, get him down here on a warm day, he's going to come. And some of that worked and some of that didn't. And so John just one day said, I think we can do better. There's a lot of kids just in the county, 2 counties. And so I kind of turned them loose, and that's how and then we made a mix. We'd get some Florida junior college kids tied in with that. So those kids would be from the West Coast of Florida, wherever. And that would tap you into some high school kids from the West Coast. And so we gradually got more kids from Florida, from all different areas in Florida. And still, you still get some really good kids from out of state. I mean, we had Danny Jackson, one of the greatest pitchers ever at Florida Atlantic. He was a kid from Chicago. Went to a junior college up there and came in. He had 2 unbelievable seasons for us. One of the greatest pitchers I ever saw. He was an out-of-state kid, and we've had a bunch of kids from all over the country. And I know that John's got them from different areas now too. You can't just stay in one spot.
All right, let's go back to Chad. Got a pretty interesting question here. I'll let you answer that. Wasn't it a safety issue to not have aluminum bats in MLB due to the ball off the bat speed? I like that question. How do you feel about
that? Was always the rationale, that, and now they can quantify it with, I'm so tired of watching. Get off my lawn. Here's an old man complaining. Yeah. I'm so tired of every baseball broadcast, especially Carl Ravitch, who does the College World Series.
Right.
Every pitch, he has to tell you how fast the pitch was. Who cares? And strike with a 93 mile an hour fastball, and then the exit velocity on that was 89 or 109, whatever. Come on, who cares? Whatever happened to God, he hit the crap out of that one. It's like I'd rather get a job as an announcer and change some of the new ways they do things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was definitely one of the reasons from the beginning. And of course, baseball is such a steeped in tradition sport. I think that'd be a really radical change. It's bad enough we now have pizza boxes for bases with the rule change, making that extra large base, which is stupid, and those oven mitts they let the base runners wear. What's the purpose of that?
Right.
And so if I slide with my hands out like this into the base, but I have the oven mitt, I'm going to get there sooner.
Right.
How is that fair? I don't get it. But I'm 72.
All right. Well, another Wayne Weinstein question, and we're going to sprinkle in 2 more before it's over. There's so many kids down here that play over play in the perfect game tournaments and don't get recruited. So there are a ton of players available that aren't even being recruited by major programs or even being drafted. How do you justify that?
Okay, well, first, that's not true. The whole perfect game thing, another thing, well-intentioned and has a purpose, but it's a moneymaker. That's a cash cow. And they'll put perfect game, the name perfect. And one of my dear friends, a former player, is one of the head guys for Perfect Game, Tony Von Daltron. There are Perfect Game sponsored tournaments. So we got to go to Perfect Game here, Perfect Game there. It does, because it was Perfect Game doesn't necessarily mean the quality of the players at that Perfect Game event are that good. Secondly, if you're good, you're getting seen. If you're not in today's age, there's something wrong with you, because you can promote yourself just by sending a text message with short video to a coach. And my son he's the youth director for Marucci Midwest baseball in Springfield. Well, its headquarters is in Ozark, Missouri, and they're the largest youth baseball program. They're playing every weekend. Every weekend from the beginning of March on, they're going everywhere. It's freezing cold. They're playing someplace. And those parents are paying for hotel rooms every weekend. It's amazing the money that's spent. So from a young age, baseball is a rich kid sport. It's not a poor kid sport anymore. It's not like you're going to play American Legion ball and it's not going to cost you anything. You got to be on some sort of travel team today. And it starts at 7 years old, 8 and under. They'll have 8 and under travel teams. Are you kidding me? Your eye-hand coordination isn't developed at age 8. So I think I think you are being, if you're a good player, you're being seen. There are a lot of good players. And I think what young people and parents have to understand, one, you got to identify, what do I want to go to college for aside from baseball? Because, it's not just baseball. So what do I want to study? Okay. What schools offer that? Where do I want to go to college? What part of the country? All right. And don't just say, I want to go play in the South. You got to have a couple of options.
All right.
Then I think you have to say, okay, how good am I? And you get some feel from that by players that in your high school that signed and went away and played at a Division II school. Well, I'm way better than him. So maybe you're a Division I player, or the guy went to a Division II school and you're nowhere near as good as that guy. Well, don't be trying to go to Florida Atlantic because you're not good enough to go to a Division II school. So you have to realize that there's a place for everybody. You have to find that place, and you have to take your ego out of it, and you have to take your desire out of it. It isn't like I want this. No, I need this. I need to fit here academically, environmentally, because I'm going to live there, and baseball isn't every single day, and academically, and then can I play there? Do you want to go to a school where you have no chance to play? That's why we had that transfer portal. You had all these kids going, they're buying, a pipe dream, and the next thing you know, they're in over their head. Well, we've had kids that, hey, they didn't start as freshmen and sophomores, but they had good years as juniors and seniors. They had good careers. They'd have been gone now. Today's day and age, I want it now, but I should have had it 10 minutes ago. That's the attitude of everybody. So that's what makes it hard. So I honestly don't think kids, somebody's going to get missed. There's no question. But a lot of that, if you're playing ball, you're going to get seen. They're out there. But take it upon yourself. That's what I was told. I've talked to parents and stuff and kids that come to our camps. And, I said, hey, you can't play. I don't think you can play here. But, you're Division III baseball. I played Division III baseball. I coached. It's great baseball. I always told them the biggest game of the day isn't Florida versus Wake Forest. It's not TCU versus Arizona. It's not Florida Atlantic versus UCF. It's a game you're playing in. So if you can't play in those other games, it's not a big game. You got to go someplace you can play.
All right, we'll back up with Wayne, and I have 3 questions I want to get to as well. So he says, I think some of these kids have delusions of grandeur. I think it's pretty safe to say that's true.
Oh, yeah. Not just kids. Mommy and daddy.
Okay. Good comment.
I had a guy, all these parents think that an athletic scholarship is their retirement fund. A lot of parents. I had a guy come I live on a farm. We're trying to get rid of a lot of old stuff. My father-in-law I had these massive tractor tires that I'm giving away on Facebook Marketplace. So this good old boy comes driving up in his pickup, and he gets out with his kind of little overweight 10-year-old or 8-year-old. I'm not sure how old he was. And I go, so what are you going to do with these tires? And he points to his kid. He goes, he's my meal ticket. He's going college and then he's going to NFL. He's going to flip these tires. I'm like, I'm using a skid steer to lift these tires, you know. But everybody thinks their kid's going to go to college and get a scholarship. Now, that's really harder in baseball. There's not as many scholarships. It's a little easier in basketball and football.
All right. Kane Dabling has a great question. I want to get that up there as well. Coach, do you think that kids playing only one sport has contributed to the number of Tommy John surgeries? Boy, we get this out there a lot.
I think that's definitely a possibility because kids pitch more than they did. They use their arm the exact same way more than they ever did. And I don't think playing the same sport all year round is good for a kid. I love two sport athletes. You know, especially if you got a wrestler, man, a guy that spends all day getting his face ground into the mat. That's practice. You know, those other athletes, they've learned to win and lose and keep coming back. And I think I've always liked having two sport guys.
Okay, back to Chad. Guys on a roll too. Good. Keep it up, Chad. Doing great work tonight. If you call it work, but we're glad to have your comments. All right, he says high schoolers down south can practice outdoors 365 days a year. Outdoors, while northern kids can't. Is that an advantage to being recruited?
I'll say no now because there are limits as to the weeks that recruiters can be out. But I'd have to say, yeah, probably not what it was, but yeah, it's definitely an advantage. But you know what? You can hit and pitch indoors. You can field ground balls. And as I said before, with so many fields being field turf now, outdoors, that transition from being indoors to outdoor is not as big a deal. Now it is on the ball hit in the air. We always used to tell them playing in northern schools, like, hey, every ball you hit in the air, run, just keep running because there's no fly balls in the gym. Now, they do have some field houses now where they can get some fly balls, but I don't know if I answered your question.
Oh, no, you're fine. Okay, so let me ask you an easier one here. Did you play Lynn University much, and how much did you enjoy playing them?
Well, it was initially College of Boca Raton when I got there. And I'll tell you a quick story. We were playing College of Boca Raton, and this kid was pitching jimmorris, something like that.
So are you saying that Lynn University was considered College of Boca Raton?
It was called the College of Boca Raton, and then the Lynn's gave money, and it was renamed.
Oh, I know that. Okay.
Yeah. So this was probably, we're on the old field. So this was 89. Yeah, 89. So this kid that's pitching for them, right-handed pitcher, good one. And he's got a glass eye. His right eye, he's lost his eye in a fight when he was in junior college. A baseball fight. Kid stepped on him and he lost his eye tragically. Great kid. So he's got, his right eye, he can't see. I'm coaching third base. And I got a couple of really fast runners on that team. We were very aggressive base runners. So this kid, Rob Commodari, he sent me a Father's Day message. And he gets on second base, and I give him the sign steal third. So he steals third. Right. Now he's on third. And it's a close game. We could use a run. And the first pitch, I look at their pitcher. He's in the windup. Well, he's in the windup. Well, he can't see the runner. So I go, Rob, get the biggest lead you can get and steal home. He goes, what? And I go, he can't see you. He goes, Coach, that's terrible. He says to me like that. I'm like, he's playing the game, all right? If he doesn't look, you got home easy. He goes, okay. So the kid never looks, and our kid steals home easy. And everybody's hooting and hollering. Well, the catcher for College of Boca Raton, now Lynn University, was a young man named John McCormack.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes. So Mac goes out to the mound and he talks to Jimmy, their pitcher. By now, my other runner has stolen. I'm sorry, my two sons keep texting me here.
Okay.
So my other runner now has moved up, and he has stolen third because it was first and second. No, it was second and third. So now he's at third base. Jack Penrod, man, great hitter, 22 home runs. And he goes, "Can I take it? Can I take it?" And I go, "Well, let's see what he does." So I'm waiting. I'm expecting him. He's going to go in the stretch because he's in the stretch now. He's looking at you with his good eye, so you can't get a big lead. But he doesn't. He stays in the windup. So I go, "You're on, buddy," and he takes off, steals home. And McCormick was so mad that the umpire was dusting off home plate, and McCormick pretended like he was going to kick him in the butt.
Wow.
So later on, I said, "Mac, what'd you tell him when you went out there?" He goes, "Well, I told him I would yell if I saw him coming."
Yeah.
And I wanted to say, "Well, you should have told him to go in a stretch," but
Yeah.
he didn't need to be told that. But yeah, we had a good rivalry.
Yeah, it's safe to say you didn't have to travel very far to go there at all, did you?
No, but we weren't real good near the end. This one year, 91, I got fired. It wasn't because I lost to them, but it was right after losing to them. We lost a close game, and I went in the office, and the next day, and my boss was like, "What's going on with Lynn?" And because by then it was Lynn. And I go, "Well, they can get anybody in the school. I mean, if you'd pay, you could get in. You didn't have to have grades." And they got kids from New Jersey that are really good players that we can't get into school, and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, "Well, okay, well, we're not renewing your contract." And
really? They decided not to renew your contract after the Lynn situation?
No, I mean, they had already decided because it was all typed up, and he said he had the president's approval for it and everything. But 2 weeks later, I had my job back. So that's a whole other story.
Yeah, well, we'll leave a little bit for 108 Stitches baseball talk. So let's talk about the top players. Are you in touch with these guys? And I have to tell you, I'm amazed at FAU's successful 30-year run. I mean, let's face it, between you and Coach Mack is one thing, but, do you stay in touch with a lot of your top players?
Yeah, the main way is through Instagram and Facebook. And then every now and then on my birthday and stuff, people reach out to me, Father's Day. So, yeah, not as much as I would want to, especially now because I don't have a vested interest in staying in touch with them so that I ask them for a donation. When you're the coach, you're kind of asking them for a donation. But, yeah, quite a few of them. It was great seeing them all out in Houston.
Do you feel that when you were done coaching FAU, that you could have left on a more positive note, or what was the departure like leaving FAU with all the time and work that you put into that?
Well, the honest answer is it was easier to leave than a lot of people thought.
Okay.
My son was very disappointed. He said, I remember the day I told him I was going to be leaving, I was driving him to the airport. He had been visiting. He was going back to New Jersey. And I told him he was devastated because, he grew up spending summers with me down there every vacation. FAU is, he bleeds FAU. And he goes, I said, "Jeff, nothing's going to change." And he goes, "No, they're going to get, in another couple of years, they're going to get a ballpark, blah, blah, blah. You'll be in the World Series." And I'm like, "Jeff, in a couple of years, if we don't do even better than we're doing now, they're going to say your dad's too old. They're going to say he's falling asleep in the dugout." I go, "Do you want people to be happy that I'm going, or do you want them to say, 'Oh, you should stay. We want you'?" I said, and that isn't why I'm doing it now, but I didn't see what I wanted for the program. And my wife, I knew, wanted to be back here because she knew what was waiting down the road with both of her parents and taking care of them. So, I had a good out. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was going to live on a 200-acre farm on the Tennessee River. Figured I'd figure something out, and it worked out great. I mean, the next stage of my career was the best stage, so worked out good.
Which we're going to lead to that in a moment, but there is a question that you brought up or giving me an idea. Had they have had a stadium that you felt was acceptable, would you have stayed at FAU?
I think at that point, yeah, because if we had done the right things, it would have been easier to progress, because we really haven't progressed. I don't mean as a knock at any of Mac's teams. They're just as successful as we were, but we're supposed to take the next step, and that's what we all were in this for. And I think that the lack of support financially and stadium wise, coaches' salaries are atrocious there, or have been atrocious there for years. So it's hard to keep good staff.
Yeah, when we talk about me boycotting, I haven't had time to cover them, but I'll admit to you, the stadium to me was unacceptable. It was very tight, is what it was even then. And, I don't complain about anywhere that I work, but there comes a point in time that you have to make the press's job a little bit easier so we can do our job. And I felt like what's amazing? I thought the softball stadium had a better press box than the baseball one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was just a sad commentary. So we'll lead up to the final question.
Okay.
Finally, how has retirement been and treated you? I know you talked about that you had 3 lives leaving FAU. You owned an antique mall, church, truth minister, and started the farm back up 20 years of neglect. I mean, that to me is a pretty cool ending when you think of where you're at in your life and knowing that it was time to, because now what you really have told me that you wouldn't go back to coaching under any circumstances because of all the NIL and the transfer portal. But let's talk about those 3 things. And then Chad does have a comment that I'm going to put up there. Why don't you please answer
Chad? Go ahead.
All right, let's do Chad first. Okay, we'll do him. Okay, we'll put Chad, but we'll hit this one. Is sign relaying to batters still as prevalent as it was in the past decade? Great job, Chad.
Well, it's being eliminated. If you watch the College World Series, you'll see the guys looking at their watch. That's where the sign is. The signs are all electronically transmitted now. The other day, somebody was given signals. That was the first time I'd seen it in any of the World Series games. So it's all, you rarely see it any longer. Depending on the school, I don't know what FAU is doing. I know that FAU went to like an ear thing where the coach could tell the catcher what sign to call to speed things up. But then you're going through the sign series. Sign stealing was rampant by a lot of schools. Legal, well, some was illegal. That's a whole other show.
Well, now Wayne has a thank you. How do you like that? All right, let's go ahead. I'm going to read it. Coach, thanks for everything you did for the Owls baseball, and thanks for answering my questions. Hoot, hoot. Oh, isn't that a nice thing to say?
Appreciate it.
It's a nice thing to say. Great job, Wayne. He'll be appearing on another edition of the Sports Exchange at a future date. Now, back to the retirement. Okay, I mentioned you had 3 lives since leaving FAU, the antique mall, the youth minister, and now you're back on the farm. Yeah. Tell me what life is like.
Well, when we came up here, I didn't really know what I was going to do. I bought a triplex up near Dollywood and refurbished it with. I was like the laborer with a guy that had some skill, and we partnered on it. And then it just kind of fell into, it was a 100-year-old building down in town south of us where we had bought a lot of, our house is furnished with primitive antiques, things from stores and signage. And actually behind me is a sign from the original sign from the store that we bought. Anyhow, fell in love with the building. The building was for sale. Sat down with my wife and said, hey, we should buy this place. It's, we'll take a second mortgage on the house that we're just built. And I go, it's 100. And she goes, buy it. I go, it's a 100-year-old building. And she's like, you don't know anything about antiques. And then she looked at me and she goes, and you know less about business. And I go, come on, let's take a shot. So we did it. It was a mall. It was already set up. So vendors would rent space. I'd get a commission on their sales. Mm-hmm. And then once I figured out what I liked, I started buying things. I really got to enjoy that, but it was really empty. It's like, oh, how'd you do today? Well, we made $800 or we made $2,000. Like, who cares? I never thought about how much money I made in a day before. And, I got to flirt with a bunch of old ladies that thought I was funny and, and have people tell me, y'all ain't from around here, are you? And I'm like, no, I'm not. Wow. So it was enjoyable, but it was empty. It was empty. I had spent my entire life dealing with young people, and having some effect on them, hopefully positive. And that was very meaningful to me. It was a big part of my life. And I really was unhappy. And a job opened at our church, and I was fortunate to get it. It morphed into it. It was actually going to be a sports ministry. They were going to build this big field. The whole thing fell through, and their youth minister got fired. He was a train wreck. Nice guy, but a train wreck.
Right.
And the pastor called me and he goes, "Well, you're the new youth minister." And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm a baseball guy,
Right.
And I said, I went to Catholic school and everything, and, a Catholic high school. I said, but I can't quote you Bible verse. I can quote you Bruce Springsteen songs and lyrics, but he goes, well, you better start reading about the other boss, not that boss. So I got the job, and it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. If you could say, well, you had to have your youth ministry or you have to have had your baseball career, which one would it be? I'd say youth ministry. I couldn't take that out of my life. It was it touched me personally very deep inside. My faith had been reawakened somewhat through my wife, and typical lapsed Catholic. You get all that Catholic stuff beaten into you, and then you walk away from it, and then you come back to it. It's like once they got you, they just keep pulling you back. Yeah. So what was great about it is the demographic of our parish, of our young people, is probably about 90%, maybe 95% Hispanic. And, I won't say, I don't know how many of them were born here. Many of them were born here. So they're, they're always referred to as Mexicans, or you're a Guatemalan, or you're the Mexican. Well, no, I was born in Knoxville, like, why are they referred to that way? I wasn't referred to as the Irish born in New Jersey. I was an American. So anyway, there's a lot of struggles that those kids go through. And then there's the kids who were brought here with parents, with papers or without papers, many of them without papers, and just great families, hardworking families. And those young people face challenges that the average white teenager doesn't face. You're in here, your mom and dad might not even speak English. Right. So when you have a conference at school, you have to go to school and translate, and they're talking about you. Or you have to go to the doctor with your mom. You got to translate because you can speak English. The mom and dad can't. So now when mom and dad are trying to raise a teenager in this society with these phones and what a kid can see at the first time he looks at a smartphone, I used to have to try to, find the Playboy magazine in the store and not get caught. Now, are you kidding? So they're bombarded. This generation is the toughest generation in history to grow up in. And when you factor into you have two worlds in which you live. You have mom and dad's world from some small village in Mexico, and they got here, and dad works 6.5 days a week usually, and mom stays home because she's got little kids because they're all Catholics, so they keep having kids. Right. And you want to be American, but your parents want you to speak Spanish at home, but you don't really speak Spanish. So I had a girl tell me in tears one night, she goes, I know my mom's suffering with this issue. I can't talk to her about it because I don't understand Spanish well enough to get what she's saying, and I can't counsel her or comfort her because I don't speak Spanish well enough. So I had those kind of kids just dealing with growing up, let alone, trying to make them realize that, there's a place for God in your life. You don't hear about God all day long. You're not allowed to mention his name. So once a week when they drive down the driveway to our church, and we're talking about stuff that they never get to talk about. And we made it fun. I mean, it was fun. We did crazy things. I dressed as a unicorn and hid in a box. We had this big question box that they would put these questions in. And so the teaching night, I don't even remember what it was about, but I was dressed as a unicorn hiding in the box while all the kids came in the room. And my assistant is there, and they said, well, Kevin's not going to be ready. He's doing something. He's not ready. So let's say our prayer and then get started. And then all of a sudden I just popped out of the box dressed in a unicorn onesie, like crazy stuff. Just had we made it fun for kids. They wanted to be there, and it was special. It was really special. And I had to counsel dads that, I'm counseling this dad about his daughter, and I'm having trouble with my own daughter. I had a teenage daughter at the same time, same age, and I'm like, well, Sergio, you talk to Maggie, and I'll talk to Elizabeth, and we'll try to get it squared away. So it was great for me. But it got to the point where COVID, the COVID year came, so that changed everything. It came at a good time in my life because my son in Missouri was going through a terrible situation, and I was able to go back out. I'd taken some time off and been out there with him. I had to go back out. And then I just realized, you know what? 2020, I'm going to be 70 years old. So in August, I'm retiring. They don't need a youth minister older than 70, which that's irrelevant.
Right.
Those kids, they don't, it doesn't matter. So I did that. And then my mother-in-law got sick and passed away. And my father-in-law started to go downhill. And he was a train wreck. My father-in-law, good guy, train wreck. This farm, he had just completely let it deteriorate because he was running some scams with a crook out of state, and they were trying to make money on the side, and it all blew up in our faces. And we had to sell part of the property. I had to do all that. I had to clear all the property that around it so it would be attractive to sell. And then I partnered with the buddy across the street. I got to know him, and he's a young guy, 42, and he wants to be a farmer. And we have more land. I said, well, you want to raise hay? And I said, you raise the hay, I'll help you, but your cost the first year is you got to get this farm looking good again. And boom, this place is beautiful now. We rented machinery, came in, big cutting machines on a I don't even know what you call it, an excavator, and pulled trees out all along the riverbank. And we're lucky we didn't get arrested with some of the trees we took out, and then we cleaned up all the brush and sold off a whole bunch of machinery that was no good. And then we planted, we killed all the weeds in 120 acres, fertilized it all, planted it all. And we've had 2 cuttings on all the fields but one. We only have one field that's had 1 cutting so far. So far successful. Looks beautiful. I told him, I said, if we can make this farm look like it was when my wife remembers it coming here when they bought it in 1971, and it was gorgeous, and they really farmed it. I said, that's what I want. And there was a day where we cleared out a section of the water down. There's a pond, a little river area that comes in. And I called her on the phone. I said, you got to come down here and see this. And it was horrible before. It was all crap everywhere. We dug it all out, dug a big hole, buried it all. And it was beautiful. And she started crying. She goes, this is where I used to fish with my mom. It looks just like it did then. So I'm blessed. It's really good.
All right. Well, Chad, once again, what a great human being Coach is. I applaud you, sir. And, what's amazing about you, though, is you put the Florida Atlantic University program on the map. And now, as you are later in your life here, retiring, you took a 20-year farm in neglect and turned it around. So what do I got to do? Call you the turnaround king or what? I don't know. You turn around everything. So, what a show this has been. I also want to let everybody know that Coach Cooney will probably come on 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. Certainly it'll be a much simpler thing that we have here. But before I brought him on here, I wanted to make sure that everybody had a chance to get to know Coach Cooney the way I had a chance, the good pleasure of working with him for a while. And also, kind of let this out of the bag a little earlier, I've joined a company called the Eglevator Corp or Egla Corp, and I'm working on my own show down the line, Coach. I want you to be the first guest on it, called the Motor City Mad Mouse Show. I feel this is a great way to start, and you'll be on 108 Stitches Baseball Talk and but my partner is Edwin Hernandez, and this guy is great, and he's going to give me the opportunity to go out there and take a broadcasting division, start it from the ground up like you have. So what I'm going to do here and put it on public notice now, hey, Coach, I hope that you'll have the opportunity to be my first guest on the Motor City Mad Mouse Show.
Well, thanks, Scott.
Yeah, I really do. I mean, I appreciate you being, a good friend to me, a coach person I always look up to. And I am very, very blessed to know that you've been in my life for a long time. And, let's not kid yourself with our boycott. It's not about boycotting. I worked well with you, and the stadium wasn't very good. And I worked with Coach Don McCormack. He's not a bad guy. I have no problem with him.
He's a great guy. Need to get him on.
It just so happens that when I was working for the Deerfield Beach Observer at the time, I did a lot of baseball. But as time went on, I created my own thing at the South Florida Tribune, and I have to spread myself around as an owner instead of just being told by a paper what to do. And now it's a totally different animal.
Yes.
As you can say, I should let everybody know another time here. I know we started early, but No Limits is being broadcast around the world. The audio version of No Limits can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcasts. Please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube, South Florida Tribune. We're striving for 1,000 subscribers. Please also comment, like, and share the broadcast. I mean, if this is a very inspiring one, and I love doing one-on-one interviews as well as the other shows. Want to be a guest? I'll tell you what. Send topic ideas to southfloridatribune@gmail.com. If you want to advertise cost efficiently, call me at 954-304-4941. We broadcast live on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Our website's www.southfloridatribune.com. Twitter, Tribune South, and Candy Ebling's been behind the scenes. She puts content on the website and has participated on shows when we need her. Coach, is there any way you want anybody to be able to get a hold of you, or?
No, I'm in the witness protection program.
All right, well then I'll tell you what, I can make a safe statement. If you want to get a hold of Coach Cooney, you can just reach me.
Well, and I'm on Twitter. I don't even know what my Twitter thing is, but it's Kevin Cooney, and it's a picture of me and Bruce Springsteen. And I'm on Instagram. So
there you go. Well, if you don't find him in both places, contact me. I'll make sure we send you out there and with Coach Cooney. What a great pleasure.
Appreciate it, Scott.
To be able to have you on, Coach. So we have a lot more work ahead of us, but I just wanted to bring you on this show so everybody had an opportunity to get to know you in depth. And I'd like to think we accomplished our objective, don't you?
I hope so.
All right.
I want to thank all you guys that called in.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for the people in the chat room. You guys were in the eyes of Jimmy Walker, dynamite, but no, I'm not going to strain my voice doing that. So once again, thanks again for joining us on this edition of No Limits. On behalf of Coach Kevin Cooney, my name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us, and we will catch you the next time on No Limits.